Hello, and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name's Heather Barrett. I've been working with glass since about 2008 and teaching since 2016. So here on this channel, just trying to put together a little collection of tutorials or just watching me work or anything that'll be helpful for a soft glass worker. So today we're going to be doing a little jack-o'-lantern marble since it's just about September, so I thought it'd be a good time for it. So this is what we'll be working on today. You can see it's cute, it's pretty simple, it's good for a beginner. So maybe if you're a bead maker and you want to get a little more familiar with working off mandrel, this is a really good tutorial for you to try out. And of course, please like, subscribe, comment. It lets me know you guys are watching and that you're enjoying it. And if you have anything else you guys would like to see, please feel free to let me know in the comments. All right, let's get to the torch. And Bender just settled down on my lap, so here's a bonus Bender. See, here's the tools and glass we're using. I have the Mike Close Bump marble mold. I have some Effetria Intense Black. I'm using some orange, although you could use any color that you wanted, really. And I also have some Vetrifond thicker glass that's clear. I believe this is 13 to 14 millimeters. I have an old mandrel that's been ground down to a pointed tip, some hot fingers, and some drawing paper with my jack-o'-lantern sketched out. So I'm starting with my 13 millimeter rod in the kiln, so it's less likely to pop as soon as I hit it with the flame. And I'm just going to fuse the end of this to the end of an orange glass rod. So I'm heating up both ends so they're the same bright orange color and joining them together in the fire. And just rotating them to get them nice and even, so I have a full parallel rod of glass. And now I'm going to flame cut probably about 2 inches of that thicker Vetrifond glass. This is how I kind of make blanks of glass, so to speak. So you can see it takes a little bit longer because it's a little thicker. But as it's getting hot, I'm pulling it apart. And the extra Vetrifond, I'm going to let cool off for a second, and then it just goes right back in the kiln for the next one. And if I'm making a lot of marbles that day, I'll prep up a bunch of them and just keep it garaged in the kiln. So now I'm going to start encasing the clear Vetrifond in the orange. The reason I like to do this is I like to have a transparent core for my marbles, because generally the softer pastel colors, they can get a little bit soupy, so I just find it a little bit easier to use something a little bit more firm, and clear Vetrifond is. And it's a little bit cheaper, so it saves me a tiny amount of money. So I have the orange glass in the flame, and I'm just running it along the length of that Vetrifond. The orange is a little bit susceptible to burning, so be careful that you don't get it too hot, especially when you're separating it at the bottom of that clear glass. And I'm encasing around the entire clear piece, just trying to get them as close to each other as possible. Even a little bit of overlap is fine. You don't have to worry about distorting the core too much as if you were encasing, because you're not going to see it. So it's always a good opportunity to practice, but don't stress about it. You're just trying to get the orange covering all of the clear. One thing to be cautious of while you're doing this is as you're pulling that encasement orange all the way to the bottom, when it touches the cold orange rod, just be careful that you don't shock it, because that's something that's easy to do. So just trying to keep the encasement layer just on the clear and avoid the orange rod, just to avoid some cracking. But if that happens, it falls on your table, you pick it back up with a glass rod, no big deal, but just something to look out for. So now I've got my full encasement done, so I'm heating up that mass, and I'm just going to twist it a little bit. The reason I like to do this is just in case there's just a tiny thin sliver of clear that I might have missed. This will just kind of blend it in a little bit more, make it less obvious. It's just a precaution. And at the same time, I'm just getting some good heat into this mass of glass. I'm starting to press it together a little bit to start getting it into more of a marble round shape as opposed to a cylinder. and I'm cutting off one of the handles in the flame. I usually try to keep the end of my glass rods nice and neat, so you can see I heated it up and I'm kind of marvering a little bit. Not something you need to do, I just feel like it's a good habit. And now I'm just getting some more heat into this mass. And I don't know if you can tell, but the angle I'm holding at, I'm trying to use the gravity to also help it get into more of a squatty, round shape. And now we're using the marble mold, so I'm holding it perpendicular to the table just to keep it on center. I'm picking which cavity I feel like is the best fit and just rotating around. To start with, I am using the cavity of this marble mold as opposed to the rims, but we're just trying to get the basic round-ish shape. We'll perfect it a little more later. So going back to the flame, heating it up again, and then we'll go right back into the marble mold. Again, holding it perpendicular to the table to try and keep it on center, and then rotating around. And now, as it's a little bit roundish, we can graduate to a smaller cavity, and this time we're starting to use the rim of the marble mold to shape it as opposed to the cavity itself. And as you're refining the shape, getting a little better each time, let it cool off a little more before you start using the marble mold, just so you don't accidentally get any dings in it. Just let it form a skin a little bit. And see, I'm pausing and then bringing it over to the marble mold and rotating just like before. And I'm even using the smallest cavity of this marble mold. And at this point, I'm pretty happy with half of this sphere. So I'm going to go ahead and polish out some of these chill marks from using the graphite. So I'm not giving it a ton of heat. I'm just trying to heat up the surface to get rid of any chill marks, not trying to heat to the core. And I'm going to let it cool off a little bit, and then I'm going to use my first punty. So I'm preheating another orange glass rod, one that I've kind of sharpened to a point so it's got a small connection. Heating it up, pausing, and then touching. Trying to keep a nice small connection point, and I'm going to flame cut the first handle. If you need to, you can add a little bit more glass to your marble if you feel like that half looks like it's not going to be enough. But use your own judgment. It'll just give you a little less shaping to do if you have the correct amount of glass. So now we're going to heat the second half of this marble and shape it. So same as before, heating up the unshaped half and bringing it to the marble mold, starting with a larger cavity and then working my way up to a smaller one. So the first pass through will just be kind of giving it a rough shape using the inside of the cavity, and then we get a little bit smaller. That's where we start using the rim of the marble mold. You'll notice that I'm avoiding heating the punty because I don't want to add too much heat to it and have it fuse, but at the same time I'm not ignoring it completely. So once in a while you'll see me kind of flash that punty in and out of the flame. I'm not heating it up to where it's glowing, I'm just kind of reminding it that it needs to stay a little bit warm so the marble does not pop off of it. So I've got this marble pretty round and I'm going to start adding in my design. So I'm using some intense black, and I'm going to start by making the eye of this jack-o'-lantern by just doing a simple dot. We're not going to make it triangle yet. So at this point I have the general round shape, so we're going to start working on the design. You'll see that still once in a while I will flash the punty in and out of the flame just to make sure it doesn't cool off too much. So we're starting with 2 dots for the eyes. Not doing a triangular shape yet, just dots. And then slightly smaller for the nose. I'm going to pat those down, mostly because I don't want to overheat this orange and have it boil. When you are tapping it down, just be mindful that you're using a punty. You don't want to knock your marble off. And now we're going to turn these dots into triangles. So I'm making sure they're melted in well, and now I'm using my pointy mandrel. Heating up the tip of it a little bit so the glass sticks to it, touching down on the black glass in each corner and just pulling them out to the side just to make a rough triangular shape. If it's not sticking, make sure that you're heating up your mandrel a little bit so the glass will stick to it. Now remember that glass does not stick to a cold mandrel. So now we're going to do the same thing to the other eye. Just giving a little heat so it's actually able to move. Heating up the tip of this mandrel a little bit so the glass sticks to it. And then pulling it out at 3 points to make a triangular shape. Now unfortunately for orange and black glass, when they're heated up they kind of look the same, so I added the little diagram in the upper left-hand corner. So hopefully that'll help. But basically I'm starting with a round dot of black glass, picking 3 points, and just pulling them outward to get a more triangular kind of shape. Now I'm going to add black glass for the mouth. For the mouth, I'm just going to do kind of an oval shape. So just kind of a smear of black glass. Don't stress too much about the shape at this point because we're going to be using that mandrel to make it look more like a smile. I'm just melting it in with a little bit of an assist from a tool. Just again, trying to avoid overheating. And when you are tapping it down, just be mindful of that punty so you don't apply too much pressure. So we're starting with the corners of the mouth. We got our little guide in the upper left-hand corner. So just like before, I'm heating up the tip of this mandrel just enough so the glass is able to stick to it and just drawing out the corners. You can do this little by little, doesn't need to be all in one step. So now we're giving our jack-o'-lantern some teeth. So again, upper left corner will kind of show you a little better what we're doing here. The arrows will show you where I'm trying to draw downwards. Basically, anywhere you want there to be a corner in this outline of the jack-o'-lantern's mouth, that's where you're going to be dragging the glass. So at this point, I've kind of distorted the marble a little bit, so I'm just giving it a little bit of heat, trying to melt that in. You saw I gave the punty just a little bit of heat, and I'm just kind of tapping down some of the distortions that I did on the surface. Again, just so I'm not super overheating this orange glass that likes to boil. So I'm just trying to get it back to a relatively smooth surface. And I'm giving this jack-o'-lantern a bottom tooth as well. So you can see in the upper left-hand corner what I'm doing. I'm just heating up the bottom half of the mouth, using a warm mandrel to push the glass in the direction that I want to go. Again, anywhere there's a corner, that's where I'm trying to drag the glass using the mandrel. So now we're doing our final shaping because we just added a little bit of mass to this marble by adding the black glass for the jack-o'-lantern design. So just like before, heating it up, bringing it to the larger cavity and rotating it around, and adding more heat and gradually going into the smaller and smaller cavities. And right now we're just focused on one half of the marble that we're trying to shape. You can see that the half that's closer to the punty is still a little bit distorted, but if we try and heat it all at once, we're going to fuse the marble to the punty. So just focus on the one half, trying to get that as perfect as you can while not making yourself crazy. I say that because I don't want you to stress yourself out trying to get this marble as 100% round as possible. Obviously you want it to be round, but in the end it's handmade, you're not a machine, and you can decide what your tolerance for error is. So when I'm done in the marble mold, I'm just going to polish up the surface of this. just to get rid of some of those chill marks. Now we're going to remove that punty so we can shape the other side. So you can see I got out a scalpel or an X-Acto knife, and I just kind of cut along the connection point and then give it a good firm tap, just making sure you have it in the marble mold so it's not going to roll away. And I'm heating up the tip of the glass rod, and now I'm going to connect with a punty at a new point. So this way I can start shaping the other side. So just like before, I'm giving the second half of this marble a good amount of heat, and then bringing it into the marble mold. Starting with the larger cavity and gradually working our way down. And remember, when you're heating up your marble, you don't need to heat all the way to the core, just the outer layer, because that's the only part that you're trying to move and affect. And as we're refining this round shape, we're working more in the smaller and smaller cavities. Remember that it's actually more the rim of these smaller cavities of the marble mold that are really going to perfect your round shape. And as we get to the final shaping, I'm also pausing a little bit more after heating before I start rotating it in the mold, kind of letting it form a little bit of a skin. And I'm flame polishing the surface of this marble, just getting rid of any little ripples from using the cold graphite. And now I'm starting to let it cool off a little bit. Now I'm going to reposition my punty so I can give it one final shape using a slightly different axis. So I'm just slicing the surface with a scalpel to chill it a little bit, tapping it. And now I'm heating up the tip of the orange rod and punting in a new position. Now this is going to be my final round of shaping. You can reposition your punty as many times as you want to get as many axes. It just depends how much of a perfectionist you are. You can usually look at the reflection of the fluorescent lights. So if that square from your fluorescent light is really dancing around a lot, that means you can see there's a lot of bumps and ripples. So you might want to work on that. So whenever I'm heating it up and rotating it, I'm just looking for any additional spots that I want to perfect. So at this point, I'm done using the marble mold. I'm just going over the surface with a little bit of a polish in the flame. See, I'm not trying to heat up the core, I'm just going over the surface to get rid of any chill marks. And when I'm out of the flame, this is where I kind of start counting down, because the next step I need to hold the marble using some hot fingers, and I don't want to accidentally get any tool marks. So I usually like to kind of gradually count down to about 35, and that's when I'll start heating up my hot fingers and grabbing the marble. So I'm still giving the punty just the occasional little waft in the flame, just to make sure it doesn't cool off too much. But any area where the hot fingers would potentially touch, I want to make sure that's cooled off. So I'm heating up the hot fingers just in the uppermost portion of the flame, grabbing it, tightening it, repositioning myself so I can use my other hand to again saw off that punty using a scalpel, give it a strong tap, and it comes right off. Now I just need to melt in this little punty mark that was left behind. So I'm making sure I'm not heating up the hot fingers, I'm just heating up the area where there's that little scar. And I'm holding it perpendicular to the table to kind of let gravity melt it in a little bit. You don't want to spend too much time doing this because you don't want your marble to get too cold, but remember that you don't have a mandrel going down the center of this, acting as a heat sink, so you have more time than you think. Now you just let that hot spot cool a little bit and pop it in the kiln. And here's how it turned out. Thanks for watching.